It's probably not appropriate for me to start this off with a peace greeting, so I'm not going to. After listening to a lot of the fit that many of you sisters have been talking recently, I figured I'd go ahead and talk to you directly this time, address y'all again. And up front, know that I'm not about to be peaceful unless you're a pick-me. And that's because in this conflict, the fair thing to be is a pick-me. Except for the ladies who really do want to be alone and by themselves forever, in which case all they have to do is just say so and never at any point bother men for help in exchange for just not being castigated as some half man for not helping. And that's a different story. But for those of you who think that there's to be any interaction at all between black men and women that are not related to each other by blood, but still have something against pick-me's, this is for you. I'm going to start out by shouting out accountability commentary, Don Calypso for getting me hip to him, and Shay Sade. Now, after listening to accountability commentary's more recent uploads, I remembered something I already know, but I often forget to tell you. It's really simple, too. Non-black men mostly come in two categories as far as you're concerned. One is the non-black man that doesn't find you attractive in most cases. He finds you less attractive than women of other races, usually the least attractive of women of all races. I don't agree with these men. I'm telling you they exist. They're common. They're the most common. The second finds you equally attractive as other women, but he's ashamed of it. He won't admit it. You're still less equal to other women, either culturally or socially. Either way, you're being treated exactly as you have treated black men who don't fit enemies' negative stereotypes they impose on us, and which you raise your boys and girls alike to believe and internalize, therefore behave and bring to life in truth. That treatment that you give to non-stereotypical, or I will refer to them as NS black men, clearly shows that you view us as inferior. That's how these men are going to either view you or treat you without viewing you as such, because they know that others are going to view you as such. You treat these NS men as inferior males, deserving of no sort of bump and grind unless it's being violated by the same gender in captivity. The idea of at which you laugh, and at which even many men laugh when they're sympathetic to your trashy, nasty ass. Now, there are a minority of men who aren't black and they still find you attractive, at least as much as other women can be to them. But those guys, that second category, are often from collective cultures, and they're under more social pressure from not only the women in their families, but also from other men to not take you seriously and wife you up. So simply put, a Wyatt is the most likely to find you to be the least attractive out of all women, probably. But those exceptions, because they come from an individualistic culture, are more free to take you seriously and wife you up if they do in fact see you as equally attractive and socially equal to other women. So that's why when it is that one of them is okay, they can wife you up, or they can't get a Wyatt woman. Now, when you start looking at these men from other cultures, they may be less likely to view you as just the absolute worst of all women, although that still does happen a lot, but they come from collective cultures and they're more subject to pressure to not wife you up, take you seriously. But understand this, the way that black men are now beginning to see the voluntary traits you insist on bringing to us that take away your value and utility to us, those men that are not us see the involuntary natural traits we inherit genetically the same way. So what I mean is you take the intimately inexperienced, responsible, NS black man, waking up to the realization that they only have a shot with many of you when you get obese or when you have babies by stereotypical swaggerillas, attitudes, machismo, psychosis, and you're overall difficult because you're stressed by the results of the decisions you have made. These things are within your control. But the non-black men want you less because of the involuntary things that are completely natural. Your nose, lips, hair, and your color. That's it. So we're waking up to one set of things you control and saying, and they're having the same reaction to you based on what you don't even control and based on what is natural. That's the majority. Arab men might be the second most likely to not only admit to having their own African origins, but they're also the second most likely or most likely to give one of you a shot after a Wyatt himself. And that's only because while their culture is very collective, generally speaking, Arab men can at some point tell other men to butt out of their business. Now, you're only with as many of these non-black men in general as you are for two cultural reasons and other reasons that are not cultural, but two cultural reasons. And I think I covered them just now. One, I did not actually. And that is that Wyatt women are hard on normal Wyatt men, just like you're hard on normal black men. And they're talking about this amongst themselves in their own manosphere like we are in this one. They have a phenomenon referred to as 49ers. That's when their fours act like nines and demand nines in men. The other reason I think I did, and that is that Wyatts have an individual culture. I did cover that one. I understand that there are some exceptions. Rihanna, Janet Jackson. I understand that. And I want you to realize and keep in mind that I'm not talking about there being no exceptions ever. What I am talking about though, and this is important for you to keep in mind, what I am talking about is the rule. Also, I want to dispel the notion that you've heard that Arabs are just so racist that if a black man looks at an Arab woman, he's dead, and not only dead, but dead in the name of Allah. But that Arab men just help themselves to the slippery insides of the black woman. Now, I don't know how true that used to be generations ago, but actually now today, their women are staring at black men off and on. But much more often than their men are paying attention to you, and I'm not even saying this to brag. I'm not necessarily proud of it. I mentioned before that I've been spending time with and hanging out with some northern Nigerians, and they've been talking about a nervous feeling they get when sometimes they're out with their families and some of the non-black Arab women are staring at them. Not staring at the family, staring at them. And I have to say, they've heard rumors. In Saudi, I'll argue with them about their opinions, meaning I'll argue with the men about their opinions about blackness and beauty, because I find it blasphemous that they assume that their view is some natural human instinct to just prefer black women, like people were created to just prefer black women. I don't believe that, because God's not a racist and he didn't put even this preference on the basis of race in us. Even though we wouldn't call it racism, God is completely fair. God did not oppress you one iota. However, when Western black or non-black men disprefer non-black women, I don't have a leg on which to stand trying to argue in your defense. Do you know why there's such a difference? Here, where I live, it's about your race, not your attitude. It only becomes about your attitude when you are specified as a Western black woman, like an American or British black woman. And that particular man talking has to be exposed to Western media to even have this idea. But in the West itself, where you still live and where I did live, it's about your attitude and your race together. And they can't shake the association between your attitude and your phenotype they already don't want. We are the ones who don't have issues with your phenotype. They do. And in the West, they also got issues with your attitude like any man should. And I ain't talking to the ones who don't have it either. However, if you pride yourself as a woman that doesn't have this attitude, then even back talking to me in response to this upload will be attitude, because if you're not guilty of this stereotypical attitude, then you back talking me and giving me any kind of pushback is nothing short of a defense of that attitude. And I'm here to tell you that even your trauma, individual or collective, is no excuse for it. Even if you say that the trauma counts for something, the fact is that trauma in black men is never sufficient cause for us to have less than an attitude. Less than, let alone to have an attitude. If it's just defenses and walls up that we have, you don't take trauma as an excuse. You don't even take bad experiences as an excuse. You don't even take us being taught that by sister after sister after sister as an excuse. You don't take outright trauma as an excuse for a man to just have his guard up, practice chastity, be nervous about disrobing in front of you, respecting your boundaries, not rushing into kissing you too soon so you can boost your ego by telling him to slow down. So why should we take your individual trauma as an excuse to come to us with attitude? You always got to have some kind of correction for us. And when any of us learns to respect boundaries before we learn anything else from sisters, you hold that against us too. He's too reserved, he's too shy, he too slow, he don't try hard enough. We don't want to hear about your bad experiences anymore as some reason to have your guard up because of two things. The first is your lack of options in non-black men by comparison to ours in non-black women, and in comparison to how many of you actually want non-black men. Then your unwillingness to accept the valid excuses we have both collectively and individually is the second one. Now, some of you may want to say that you got options in non-black men. That right there is sass you don't have the right to express, because no one said none of you can ever get an NBM, or that all of us could get any ethnicity of NBW easily either. None of us stated absolutes as rules without exception. We have more options than you though, sister, plus enough to go around for those of us who do want these options. You have less than us and less than you actually want. That's where the difference comes in. And we don't have the attitude to go along with it. You have the attitude as though it's the opposite of what it really is. The proof of what I said is in your survival rate dealing with Master Charlie's grandson. And the fact that you go straight for the Wyatt man, Master Charlie's grandson, when you decide you're gonna date out. Not other men of color. Not men from neutral backgrounds that have neither helped nor harmed us. Not even that. No, you go straight for Master's grandson himself. The only thing I got against divesting is really that. But then again, do what you decide. Just take the consequences for it. In the end, what you've shown is that you just want to be Miss Ann, and you're mad because we can't give you that. And that brings me to my next point. This call by some divestors to abort black male fetuses is actually for Miss Ann herself. You see, the Wyatt misandrist had some circles calling for male fetuses of any race to be aborted. Some of you sapphires that were in their circles started to sound the same call out loud, but you you added actually a racial component. And this got them angry because they didn't want this call to be broadcasted. They wanted it spread under the radar. You got loud and angry with it publicly, and many of you don't know that the same Miss Anns from whom you got this hate you today. Some of your Wyatt sisters in arms and feminism hate you on sight, also associating the frustration they feel of you blowing their cover with your phenotype. And when they make that association, they then wind up biased against other black women who are uninvolved in any of this and are innocent because of this. So when I say attitude, it includes you correcting us for something about which we weren't even talking when we said something, or even about something which we didn't say from jump. And I'll give an example. Ms. Molly, you replied to a comment I left on Shay Shardae's video entitled, White Men Prefer Becky and Black Women Are Pissed. I said exactly, quote, as an unrecognizably ambiguous looking black man living amongst Arabs who see me as white as they are until I tell them otherwise, I can tell you that frankly these non-black men who don't even hate sisters, still hate the idea of marrying them. End quote. Now I went on to say more, but you came back with, quote, I do find it interesting that you made it a point to say that you're a black man who can pass for white, which has absolutely nothing to do with the point you're trying to make, close quote. Ms. Molly, I wouldn't mention 2 points in conjunction like that without a connection between them, and most Western black men wouldn't, nor would many from the continent, because we're so used to being scrutinized by our women that we know better. I didn't say I could pass for white. I said specifically that Arabs count me as white as they think themselves to be. Because as you went on to say, you spent so much time in Arab countries that you know them well enough to know that they count themselves as one kind of white and actual whites as another kind of white. While they use the term white, they do distinguish between the two. And then you should also know that there are things they say without hatred, but they still wouldn't say in front of you. And maybe because they wouldn't say these things in front of you, you never learned about them, and I give you that pass, to be fair. But they will say them in front of me, like calling us slaves as an example, and this is why I'm telling on them. This also includes wondering out loud verbally why any non-black man without a problem in life would marry a black woman. Now, these things don't require hatred for them to say, but they do require an assumption that's still insulting to us, and they wouldn't tolerate it in exchange from us. I tell them they discuss us exactly as liberal whites with subconscious racism discuss both them and us. You see how that works? You just had to correct me about something because you think I meant to insult you personally, even though I don't know you. But you showed me now that you want to defend the attitude as if it's something else, because that's what you did. Your self-love and your happiness with your accomplishments is not attitude, unless you express it as such. When I discuss an offense, the innocent ones don't defend the offense itself. Now, when you discuss adultery, an innocent person might defend and accuse adultery because of doubt about the guilt of adultery, but the innocent person does not defend adultery. Those who may be innocent of an offense in practice, but still try to defend or call it something else, are still supporters of the offenders and even of the offense itself. End of. This is where many of us black men start to leave alone black women. Now, the men my age can love and still leave you in mass, meaning love you but leave you alone in mass. I don't mean love and leave as in, smash and dash, pump and dump. I mean love you from a distance. Now, these younger brothers, though, that I thought would have been in their 20s at the oldest, but I learned or even in their 30s these days, are beginning to hate you categorically for not just rejection like you're taught to say, but for how they were raised. Not rejected, but raised. That means they got sick and tired of their own grandmoms, moms, aunts, older cousins, older sisters, inflicting and subjecting them to plantation trauma-induced coping mechanisms employed in child rearing, and then passed down and justified as culture. And with the sentences, that's just how it is, and that's just how we are. F out of here with that mess. Maybe you don't have that attitude, but you went on to tell me that if I find the attitude to be offensive, then just don't be with a black woman. Well, I know that. But we have to tell these young boys not to as well, because Danielle George has already confessed that nothing is going to slap the attitude out of the sisters except black men leaving them alone. That's what she said. She said that almost 2 years ago, live to BGS Ibmore. From this, she learned that phenomenon is already starting. Since then, sisters are confessing on TikTok, and Infinite Colors has immortalized some of those videos already in his own videos on YouTube. Shout out to him and his dad, Plickett. So I'm here to tell you that to even defend Western sisters or even Western white women is actually wrong, both factually and morally. You don't have a moral right to defend yourself if you're talking about attitude. Or even her. There's nothing that can justify the attitude. Or even the opinions about men held by many women of both races. It's a few guys out here succeeding with most women in the bedroom, if you call fornication any kind of success. And the rest of us get to hear the blowback and the consequences of these few dudes that pump and dump, smash and dash, skeet in and skid out, and sometimes even conceive and leave. The attitude, the walls of the defense, the extra we're expected to do for less in exchange, the lies about what these women even want in the first place, and worst of all, the blame from these same women for not being what these women want after being lied to, are all the consequences with which most of us must deal, for what a few even could do, and which these few who could do these things never face. Your and any other sisters' very defense of attitude and trying to make it or name it something else like self-love, which is vastly different, is a part of that attitude. This is merely a resistance to being corrected like you need to be. What you're always collectively trying to do to us shines. Correct us, even if you gotta make up something we said or meant to correct us. Ma'am and others like you. It's as simple as we're right and you're wrong. Your attitude is up fuck, and even your taste in men are up fuck, and we don't have to respect that, but we're required to actually disrespect them when those tastes are anti-intellectual, savage, animalistic, yeah, I said it, hybristophilic, and even worse than amoral, outright anti-moral. We got every right to warn these young men, boys, even if they're your sons, because even many non-malicious black mothers won't do it. And you have no right to vilify us as a group or race of men in exchange, or even tell us to shut up. If you had attitude, you need to shut up. We're not the same for the simple reason that we're right and you're wrong, and it's just that simple because you collectively made it so. You had all the options in dating, marriage, and sex. You had advantages we didn't. You had custody of the future. You had Mass on speed dial in the form of 3-digit emergency numbers and his willingness to believe you over us. You had the color purple. You had, before that, Tina Turner's stanky self lying on Ike. To anyone who thinks about back-talking me or correcting me about this, it's only because you can't let it fly, because it does apply. Thank you for listening. Black heart, black mind, blackout. Black, heterosexual, non-stereotypical, non-select male power because you don't like it. And black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day.